Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of the Tully Legends Podcast. We are very excited today to have Preston Droessler joining us from 4A Performance up in Brookings, South Dakota. Really nice to meet you, Preston. Thanks for jumping on. As you know, we were talking kind of off air and getting into this podcast. This conversation is really about highlighting you all, your facility, your coaches, your athletes, everything you guys are doing. With and without Tully, and sort of a little bit of singing your praises, but kind of communicating, how you've successfully implemented your system and your program, and hopefully sharing that insight with others. So thanks for jumping on.
Absolutely. Appreciate you having me. Looking forward to this.
Yeah. So we've, at Tully, we work with high school athletic departments and programs. We work with, private gyms and facilities. Obviously, you're in that private gym space. But for those who don't know, talk a little bit about 4A. Like, how are you guys structured? What's the origin story? How you got involved, and what does it look like, kind of day in day out up there in Brookings?
Yeah. So primarily, we're a second through college sports performance facility. We focus primarily on resistance training, speed performance, that type of stuff. We don't necessarily dabble into on-field, on-court work. We leave that to the teams. But as far as any of the off-field performance stuff, we try to handle in-house. With that, we've branched off into offering our performance physical therapy, which helps with the rehab. We've got in-house sports nutritionists. We do all of our recovery services here. We really try to be just a one-stop shop for local athletes that are trying to elevate above the competition and get a little more than what the school is offering, which in our area, it's pretty rural, so kids are limited. That was kind of why we set up shop in Brookings, because there's really nothing between Sioux Falls and Fargo for athletes looking for more. So this was kind of, that's why we set up shop here. And a little background, I guess, is so we are owned by Be Well Company. Be Well is a group fitness studio for adults. They've been around for a little over 10 years. I had no involvement with that prior to this. But then when they decided to build this new facility in Brookings, they wanted to dabble in the sports world and bring in that performance side, but they just didn't have the know-it-all or kind of the background to do that. So it was kind of a perfect timing situation for me and my wife. We were down in St. Louis, and we were looking to get back to Sioux Falls. At the time I was staff PT, outpatient ortho. Realized that wasn't really what I wanted to be the rest of my life. I wanted to be more in the performance side of things, while still handling rehab, but I wanted to be with healthy athletes too. And, this came across that they were looking for someone to head up this 4A performance project. And like I said, didn't really know anything about them, and got to meet with them, understood their vision, and, it was kind of a perfect relationship that we didn't really know was gonna exist. And so we got this thing up and rolling. And the first year, as any new company can attest, it's a grind. It's a tough. Begging kids to come train with us, essentially handing out free trainings here and there, discounting whatever it takes to get kids in the door, because we knew once we had them in the door, it was going to be over, right? That they would buy into our system and see everything that we had going for us. And that was fortunately how it shook out, especially over these past 6-12 months. We've really seen our numbers just take off, and it's something we're truly grateful for. And that's kind of led us to the expansion of bringing this down to Sioux Falls. So that's kind of the 10,000 foot view of 4A and everything we got going on here.
Yeah, makes it sound really easy, as I'm sure it was. Open the doors and they'll come in, and it's a unique challenge. Well,
sure.
Yeah, well, it's awesome. I mean, obviously, a testament to the success you've had, the kind of culture you guys have built, is that you skipped ahead to the end story of opening a second location in Sioux Falls. And so talk about what went into that. I mean, what does the facility look like? I mean, take us in the weeds. Like, what type of group sizes? Is it one-on-one training? Like, how many coaches you guys have? Like, what's the setup? What are you guys delivering? It sounds like like complementing a little bit of what the kids might be getting in their other, in their school training or outside training? Like, how do you guys go about that?
Yeah, we always try to complement what the school offers, right? Because that's the relationship you want to form eventually, is to where we're getting into schools, which, we've been blessed to do with. We've had 5 local high schools actually contract with us to come in and run, whether it's their school-based performance training or for their specific teams. Like right now I'm working with a couple girls basketball teams per se. But here in-house, we'll do anything from one-on-one training, small group training, and then we've got our general group stuff, which we break up into speed. We call our speed stuff House of Speed, right? It's all about the marketing. We got that, and then we've got some off-season groups rolling right now, and then we've got a couple sports specific, if you want to use that term. I know that's pretty hot topic, a term out there, but we use it more just for scheduling. Get all volleyball girls in here because they all got the same schedule. But we will go anyway, like I said, from one-on-one, small group, that's 2 to 5 usually, and then our general group stuff is up to 20 athletes. Right now, our facility can comfortably fit 20. Anything more than that tends to be, a lot of standing around, as athletes can attest. You only can do so many with so many racks. But right now, in our current facility, we've got 4 squat racks. We've got indoor custom black turf. We've got Vault for all of our digital tracking, all of our handheld dynamometry, that type of stuff. We utilize Tully, obviously, every single day. And then for our speed stuff, we do a lot of resistance type sprints, and then the curve treadmill, right? It's winter in South Dakota. You can only do so much. So we gotta get creative as far as spatial limitations. So that's kind of what we're working with here as far as equipment. Yeah, all that same stuff's going to come with to Sioux Falls. Yep, I got you.
Told me it was trying to reconnect. Okay, cool. I think I heard it. Yeah, heard all of it. So we can just keep rolling. Yeah, I mean that's awesome to kind of hear the structure of it, and I feel like it's always, we work with facilities across the country, and we work with schools, we work with the private space. Like, it is, you hit on kind of that complementary nature of it. I think sometimes it can be adversarial, but understanding, we know a lot. Kids have to go to school. They're going to run through a lot of sports, still run through the schools and through that training. And I think we've talked with a lot of different coaches in the private space, and one of them being Graham Wilkerson, who's a customer of ours in the Indianapolis area, owns Genesis Sports Performance, talking about, like, early on for him, what, like, kind of the light bulb was, like, hey, they're probably getting the lifting stuff, the strength stuff is the kind of the bread and butter for maybe a school program, and they wanted to major for them was like the sprint and like agility and explosiveness. Like, we can do that here. They're not getting it in the school, and that became a real catalyst for them to kind of bring more and more kids in the door, speak to parents, understand the value. Was there kind of a catalyzing moment or something for you guys? Like you mentioned, begging kids to come in. Obviously, once they're in, they see you guys and the system, they're on board. But, like, was there something from marketing or way you guys positioned Foray that you felt like was a real moment for this growth?
The real turning point, I would say, was when we got to establish buy-in from the schools themselves. When coaches started to refer their kids directly to us, because they knew, I'm not sure what your childhood was like, but those small schools, the guy running the weight room is probably the history teacher, or someone that played ball back in the 90s and hasn't done anything since. So they started to realize, hey, we've got this service, let's go utilize it. And so once coaches started buying with that, that's when things really started to take off for us. But then, coming back to you guys, when we're able to then showcase all of our improvements, our results and stuff, and see the trends of when these kids came into us, put that up next to where they're at now, it just, coaches love that. So that's really been kind of our selling point now, is just hanging our hat on our results and the progress these kids are making, along with keeping them healthy and keeping them on the field, on the court. So at the end of the day, that's what matters.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are kind of the poster child for that, and something we preach all the time. And I mean, even in the high schools, talking to the high school strength coaches, it's always, I mean, the data is, unfortunately, there's so much has been sports science and data for data's sake, and we all get bogged down in this idea, but it's really the measuring stick that you all have to communicate that value and to show it to the athletes and parents. Like, they don't know what RSI is, but like they know, hey, Preston gets kids better in this metric and in this area. Like, we're going to see improvement. So I mean, obviously, you guys are thrilled, and that's what we built Tully for, is like being able to be that data set and that information, hopefully to drive that marketing and to communicate that value really, really clearly, really objectively. That tangible progress in that sense, and it works. As you point out, I think it works across the board, like for athletes, for parents, for coaches, for school athletic directors. Like, I'm sure you've had AD meetings, or those schools that bring you in, they might be the last person to say yes, and it's like, why should we hire you? It's like, oh, here you go. Like, here's one sheeter on, exactly the percentages. These are the kids. This is what you're going to get with our program, and it's like a no-brainer at that point. Which is awesome to sort of hear. What are those like metrics for you guys? Like, what are those? What's the measuring sticks? Is it the sprints, speed, jumps, like lifts? What do you guys really look at?
You hit them. Our big one's RSI, right? I think that's the one that carries over the most to any sort of athletic performance, whether you're on the court, the field, the track. I think anytime you can absorb and disperse load efficiently, like that's going to carry over to no matter what you're doing. So that's our big one. Obviously, there's a million ways that people test RSI. We do it off of 16 inch depth there. It's just easier to standardize. It's not too tall for most athletes, so we rock with that. We do a lot of broad jump testing. That's kind of one of our big jumps. But then obviously your vertical stuff, but we don't do a lot of standing verts. We do it mostly gather, full approach, that type of stuff, especially for like our volleyball athletes. We rarely ever 1 rep max for any barbell lifts. Our thing is, if you have to move it slow, then it's probably not that useful. So we try to keep our athletes moving the bar as fast as we can, and that translates a lot to our kind of our power lifts too. Like, we don't push any sort of Olympic lifting. We only save that for our college athletes that are going to be required to do that at whatever school they go to. But we just don't believe the ROI is worth spending that long and teaching a kid to be proficient in it when we can get them loaded on a trap bar jump or heavy med ball work day one. So as far as our big metrics that we track, like I said, our RSI broads, and then kind of those approach or gather jumps, and then obviously we'll test like pro agility and stuff just so kids have it for recruiting standpoint, but it's not something we hang our hat on a lot. But we do test, and fortunately with our contract with Vald, we're able to get all those metrics about as accurate as anyone. So we've got that, and then top speed on treadmill. That's kind of the other big one we hit. So
that's great. It's awesome. What's like the typical profile of an athlete who comes into 4A? Like, are they the high school kid who wants to go play in college? Or are they just kind of looking for a supplement to what they're doing in the schools? What does it kind of look like? What motivates them? How do you guys view it? And then again, like, how have you translated that kind of into your training and your approach with them?
Our biggest clientele is definitely a multi-sport high school athlete that wants to play college. That's why they're coming to get extra work, is because they know they have to in order to separate from, whatever's coming next. Whether that be any sport though. Like, we've got kids. So in a year and a half, we've been fortunate to send 20 kids to go on to play college athletics. And that's been women's basketball, men's basketball, football, track, volleyball, and hockey, women's hockey. So we get athletes of all backgrounds, all of them with the same goal, and that's, go play at the next level.
Gotcha. Okay. So that obviously those goals and that progress is really, really key. What's like the cadence on feedback do you get? I mean, I assume, maybe some of them are coming to you in their senior year and you only have a few months with them, but like, for those kind of longer term kids, how do you look at that? Are you monthly, or are you annually giving them, reporter feedback, meeting with parents? Like, what does that cadence look like in that communication on their
We
progress?
tend to give full breakdowns every 3 months, almost quarterly, because a lot of our programs run off kind of that quarterly schedule when sports season kind of shift, that type of stuff. So we'll get a lot of pre-post testing every 3 months. But then any kid that makes the account on Tully is then able to view their progress whenever they want. So that's what's been really nice as far as sharing it with parents. We don't have to do a lot of sit downs. We can just kind of explain what they're already looking at. But yeah, and then otherwise we'll do our big testing kind of May-ish, beginning of summer, and then August as they go back, because that's when we get the kids the most consistently, and that's when they're able to push a little bit harder.
Yeah, gotcha. How do you navigate the kids who kind of, I always hear all the time, they kind of disappear for the summer, right? If you're a baseball player and you disappear and then you come back, I mean, that's tough. They can come back in 4 months but be a totally different kid, right, in maturity level. And so it's a unique challenge for you all in the private space. Like, how have you guys navigated that? How does the data help in that case, and go from there?
Well, the big thing is getting to know the kid personally. So we know what they're going to come back as. Like, we know what their demands are. We know what their baseball schedule is going to look like. So we kind of are able to keep tabs on kids even when they're not necessarily training with us. And that's been a big thing for us too, is just building those relationships. And that's kind of how we've established that trust with players, parents, coaches, and they know that we've always had the kid's best interest in mind. But kind of roping back to your question, you never really know what you're going to walk into when a kid comes back from 6 months. It's like, yeah, he was playing the sport, but was he doing anything? Was he lifting? Was he running? So every kid, no matter when they come back to us, they fall back kind of into a foundations phase. Get them back to the basics, a lot of the eccentric work, a lot of technique work, and make sure that that's still sound before we let them jump back into whatever the rest of, say it's a sophomore, whatever the rest of those high school kids are doing at that time period. So it's always about making sure that the kids are still dialed in on form, technique, and then we'll get them back into whatever progression the rest of the group is with. At the end of the day, it's all about making kids healthy and keeping kids healthy, because you see at the schools, you got 40 kids in a session, there's no foundations, right? They're thrown into whatever. You got a freshman kid, he's doing whatever the senior is, and that's when injuries happen. That's when lack of confidence happens, right? Kids lose interest, and there's a lot of that stuff. So we really try to break it down back to the basics. If a kid's been away from us for a while, and then slow and steady get them back to where they should be.
It kind of plays in. We've talked about it already, but one of the biggest things we talk about at Tully and with customers, again, doesn't matter what environment you're in. It's that buy-in engagement question. I feel like that's kind of the magic bullet in all of this. As I'm not a strength coach, and our founding team are not performance coaches, not strength coaches. Like, we're the athlete perspective, and I always I did this years ago when we started the company, to kind of think back to the best coaches I had, or the best facilities, best experiences, and I couldn't objectively say why they were great. Like, I couldn't say that, I got 100 pounds stronger, this person made me so much faster, right? Like, the only time I really trained purposefully was my pro day, because I wanted to hit numbers, and that was the most meticulous I ever was. But it was, for me, and I've had other coaches say this, it was about that consistency, and obviously it's the relationships, and I'm sure that kids like you and they enjoy being around you, but the consistency of what to expect. The bad experiences were always really inconsistent, where you didn't really know what you're going to get. You kind of feel like, why are we doing this today? It doesn't feel right. And so, we always, maybe you have a mantra or a tagline or saying around it, but that consistency or that culture that you can kind of come to expect. What maybe you've heard it already, but what do you think your athletes or your parents, what would they say about 4A? What is that for you guys? What is that piece that you think people kind of can hang their hats on?
Well, you kind of hit on it a little bit. So tagline, the motto, ours is, don't wait until you're a champion to train like one. And a lot of kids kind of buy into that and realize, if I want to be the best, I got to be willing to put in the work for it. But as far as the consistency aspect, we've got seven coaches on staff. And so any given day, they might get a different coach. We try to keep, if I've got an off-season high school group, I try to keep the same coach with them all the way through. Like for volleyball, we've got the same person running volleyball all the way through. But, scheduling happens. And so that's why we do constant trainings, constant meetings to make sure every coach is always in the loop and every coach understands the 4A way, I guess, if you want to say it that way. So with that, anytime we bring in a new coach, they have to be with me or one of my senior staff in order to understand. And they're just observing for the first few weeks and see it. Like, what's the vibe? What's the level of coaching? How intense are we with certain? How do we interact with, this kid versus this kid, and that type of way. So we really try to ease our coaches in the same way we do our athletes, and make sure everybody's on the same page. That way, if there's a change in staff, there's no drop off in coaching, and kids still get the same exact experience that they're looking for.
That's all. I mean, that again, another testament, kind of that when you have that many coaches and that kind of that movement, that's really hard. I mean, that we see all the time, right? It's like kind of quality assurance and making sure that it's that same experience. And I'm sure you're going to level up another level to Sioux Falls in a whole different city, different location, maintaining that kind of quality across every aspect of it. We've talked a little bit in the past. I know, some of the features you guys use with Tully, and I think a lot of what we're not, kindly been referred to. We're not really the data guys. Like, we're not really focused on, again, just data for data's sake. It's kind of hopefully building tools that, play into everything we've been talking about, from that consistency and that buy-in engagement. What are the pieces of Tully that you guys are using every day, as you mentioned? How is that either kind of joined into the existing culture you guys have built, or maybe altered things for you guys? And then how do you see that kind of translating into the new location?
Yeah. So, first thing kids see is one of my favorite things, and that's pulse, right? That gives me a lot of feedback as far as programming. Kids are coming in, okay, it's day 2 of the week, and they're constantly coming in sore. What are we doing on day 1, and what do we need to change to kind of alleviate some of that? So that's one of my favorite features. One of the easiest features that we use as far as like functionality is the live view. So we pop the live view up on our TV in the weight room, and kids can instantly see. We put up whatever the lifts are that we're tracking that day. So kids automatically see, what did we do last week? Okay, that's it. They don't need to search through a sheet. They don't need to, track everything pen and paper. It's just right there. And then it kind of creates a little competition too, because now, you got player A lifting with player B, and they look up and they said, oh, they did this much weight. Now I want to beat them. And kind of drives a little competition inadvertently, which is always great. What I love too is this summer we did a lot of the Tully scores. We tracked our Tully scores, and we kind of used it as a competition piece as far as, all right, who's going to be the most consistent this summer? Who's going to push themselves harder than they did last week? Who's going to drive that score up? And we recognize those athletes that had the highest Tully scores throughout the summer. I love the graph. If you look at an exercise and you can just instantly see the graph, that's a lot more digestible than trying to look at a bunch of different numbers and see, okay, how much do we really improve? The graph is a lot more, reads a lot easier, especially if you're just trying to explain to a kid that's, maybe feeling like they're not improving that much. I was like, all right, let's look at this graph. You see how much you went up? Like, you're improving a lot. So I'd say like those are kind of our favorite features. Now, obviously we utilize all of them every day. And we try to require athletes, even when they're not training with us, to still fill out the pulse. So that way we can still keep tabs on them, even days they're not necessarily with us. We can see, like, if we lifted on a Thursday and they're not going to be here on a Friday, we can still kind of see how they were feeling on Friday. Was Thursday too much? And, it gives us a lot of insight as far as the programming. What can kids really handle at that time? And like you alluded to, like, we're not just going to collect data just to collect data. Anybody can do that. It's what are you going to actually do with the data that makes you a better coach, makes you a makes you as a facility kind of stand out. 'Cause you can see a lot of people that are just, throwing numbers up with no real rhyme or reason, and just kind of gets lost in the weeds a little bit. But I think Tully does a good job of helping us kind of mainstream all that. And it takes a little bit of accountability on the players too. If they want to see that number go up, they have to manually log it rather than trying to do that pen and paper. How many fifth and sixth graders you've read their handwriting? It's not very pretty. So this makes it a little nicer on our coaches.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that was, to go back in my time machine, that was sort of mine. Anytime I didn't want my coach to actually see my number, I scribbled it or sweated on it, or, and then you kind of realize as an athlete too, the other thing to talk about is like, athletes are smart. Doesn't matter if they're 8 years old or they're pro athletes. Like, if you tell us RSI is important, but you only test it twice a year, we never see the data on it. You never talk about it other than those like couple tests, and you talk about like, it's not important, right? So like this, you kind of signal what actually is important. What should we be investing into? And it allows, what we try to do with Tully, and obviously you kind of hit on you guys using it. You're really bringing that to the forefront for these parents, for these athletes, that they understand what's important. And that's really the training. Like you said, that accountability is important. The consistency is important. The showing up every day, like, doing your pulse survey while you're, on your own, and, whether that's with Tully or not. I just think it's really cool to see. And, as we grow, we get to see kind of these different, again, different brands, different cities, different parts of the country, but that seems to be a common thread. Again, whether you're in a high school, a hospital system, a private facility, like the coaches and the organizations that do that really well, they see those results and they see that consistent, more athletes coming in, and that buy-in and that engagement, piece. So obviously data is a part of that, but I think if it starts to overshadow those other things, it can be, potentially problematic, or you sort of, get lost in the shuffle. So like with that, and as we kind of wind down the conversation, I mean, talk to, there's new gyms opening every day. As former NFL player, I've got teammates, that's maybe one of the biggest markets. Everyone wants to like open a gym, and they want to open a facility, they want to train, and like, hey, I did it myself, I can help. Like, what's your advice to those folks, other than, maybe don't do it, but if they're going to do it, like, what's simple advice to just say like, okay, here's kind of the basics to start with. Like, how can they set up structures? Like, what would you tell them if they called you in for an hour? Like, what would they get out of Preston?
The biggest thing is, I would say, make sure you're advocating for yourself. Advocate for yourself as a business. Advocate for yourself as a coach. If people don't know about you, they're not going to come to you. You got to be able to get out there. You got to be able to put yourself in front of coaches, in front of athletes, and sell it, right? If you think you're the best coach, you got to make them believe it too. And that goes for, anytime we're trying to establish new contracts with a school. Like, we are constantly pushing 4A to them. How can we help you? It's not about how you can help us. It's about what can we do for you? Because I think if you truly are in it for the right things, you're trying to help athletes be better, and you're not chasing the dollar signs, you're going to reap all those rewards if you're truly in it for the right thing. And I think that those are the two things that I would really kind of push on any young professional in this field is advocate for yourself, and make sure you're always in it for the right reasons. Because once you start chasing the dollar signs, this field is going to burn you out in a hurry. And that's the unfortunate side of things. I see a lot of coaches, a lot of facilities go through that. So you got to be willing to weather the storm, especially that first year, first 18 months. Like, it's going to be a grind. You're not gonna see the light at the end of the tunnel. One day it's going to flip, and your place is going to be more packed than you could have ever imagined. You're going to be opening a second location that you swore you never were going to open. Just keep your head down and stay the course, and trust the process, and it's all going to work out.
Yeah, you keep stacking those events, those experiences, and then you kind of see. I think that's not even for just the performance and coaching space. It's like I've felt that in the course of Tully, where early days you're kind of, you're not even sure yourself. Like, is this really? Am I really solving a problem? But once that's a great feeling that you're like, you know what? I know this is going to help you. Like, I want to help you. I want this to be part of, for us, it's part of your business, part of your operation, because it's going to make your life easier. Obviously, now for you guys, being able to say that and walk into these schools and be like, Mr. and Mrs. AD, whatever it might be, like we can take this off your plate for you and we can make a difference. Like just kind of let us do it. I think that's, people respond to it and it becomes really, contagious at that point, which, that's awesome to hear, Preston. I mean, in the last minute or two, kind of what do you want to pump up, like promote, you're going to clinics, obviously the new location, but what's going on in your area or with you right now? Books you're reading, whatever it might be.
Focus right now is the new location. January 1st here, we just opened our expansion on our existing facility in Brookings. So we brought in new physical therapy treatment room. We brought in red light therapy, cold plunge, sauna. We've got the sports massage therapist starting up here in a couple weeks. We've kind of blew up everything as much as we could here in Brookings. So now we're just ready to hit the ground and get things rolling in Sioux Falls and bring this to a whole bigger market and, impact as many more athletes as we can.
Awesome. Well, Preston, great having you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing. I know it's super helpful for folks who'll be listening, other people in the Tully network and beyond. So, we're looking forward to that second location and more great things to come. But once again, Preston Droessler, 4A Performance, thanks so much for joining us.
Appreciate it, Adam.